Welcome to the Alain Guillot podcast, a podcast about life, leadership, and money matters. Our guest today is Trey Williams. Trey is a speaker, author, entrepreneur, and nationally recognized expert in entrepreneurship and business strategy. He has sat at the helm of two international brands and has supported thousands of entrepreneurs on their journey to self-employment. And today we will speak about his new book, Boss Brain, Unlock Your Entrepreneurial Instinct. Trey, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I really am excited about this.
So, Trey, you know what? When coronavirus got started last year, April of last year, we saw, at least in my community, I saw the true entrepreneurial instinct of some people and the lack of entrepreneurial instinct of some other people, because it seems like all of a sudden, most of the world lost their regular jobs, whether you are employee in this and that, or if you were an entrepreneur, many entrepreneurs lost their jobs as well. So having a blank piece of paper, we get to decide, okay, what do I do next? And those who had the mindset of employees, they went to look for another job. And those who had the mindset of an entrepreneur, they say, what kind of new business can I create, do my new environment? So I guess that was like a test of where are you true instinct. And I'm eager to deep into your story. I wonder, how is it that you got into entrepreneurship?
I grew up in a very rural environment on a farm in the southern part of Georgia in the southeastern United States. And we made money in a variety of ways on that farm in any way that we could. Sold vegetables. My mom painted ceramics that we sold at Christmas time. We looked for opportunities because in that environment, no one is standing on the corner saying now hiring. There are no readily available jobs. There is no low-hanging fruit, right? So you can't just suddenly turn 18 and get a job in that environment. You have to be industrious. You have to be entrepreneurial. And I think in that environment where those types of opportunities aren't available, you're forced to become more like an entrepreneur. And you're forced to have that mindset. And it really was imbued in me at a low age.
Okay, so imagine for a second that you grew up in a different environment, in an environment, let's say you grew up in the suburbs and that there were help wanted in every other corner. You think your future would have been different, that instead of you trying to figure out how you can make a living, how you can earn $1 or two, you would have just applied for the first available pizza shop that needed a driver or a pizza maker or something?
It doesn't mean that I would not have eventually become an entrepreneur. I think a lot of us have that inner calling regardless. In fact, the word entrepreneur comes from a Sanskrit word meaning inner calling. So some of us just have that inside where, like you haven't been employed more than a year for your entire life. You've been an entrepreneur your entire life. Some of us just have that drive. So I still think I would have become an entrepreneur. However, studies show and statistics show that when there is predictable adequacy, when there are jobs made readily available, when you can step out your door and put in applications and 2 weeks later get a paycheck, that people too gravitate toward that predictable adequacy, even when they in their hearts want to be an entrepreneur, because they choose the safe option, the more predictable option, which is really kind of a microcosm of what the book is about.
Okay, so some of us have that inner spirit of entrepreneurship, but at the same time, many of us cannot even think of the risk of taking responsibility for our own life, of being responsible. How am I going to attract a client to my goods or service? And I think in a certain way that is one of the biggest barriers to entrepreneurship, that fear, not only of the financial loss, but also of losing face with a client. Oh, I'm not good enough. Oh, how can I compare myself with this other competitor who has been in business for 10 years, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, absolutely. So there have been a lot of studies on this that show, I don't think you would disagree that creativity and innovation is a hallmark of humanity. It's what makes us really who we are, is this ability to find creative solutions to problems, and to think laterally and to be innovative. Well, when you're in a job and you're living hand to mouth, you lose your instinctive creativity. You actually lose the efficacy of that, the ability, your basic human ability to innovate. And this has been shown over and over. There's a very famous study with farmers in Sri Lanka, who show that within the context of living hand to mouth, they're completely incapable of thinking of a solution, a way to escape that cycle.
Mm.
But when they get a big paycheck at the end of harvest season, suddenly they all become very entrepreneurial and start looking for ways to break out of that cycle. So there's a time debt and a poverty debt, obviously there, but there is no poverty like poverty of time, and that's what shuts down your ability to escape that cycle.
Mm. Okay. Can you, going back to your background, so you had this entrepreneurial spirit, and then as I was reading in your bio, you have been in leadership roles with two major brands. Can you just fill us in on what were you
Yeah,
doing?
yeah, sure. So I landed in the franchise industry, coincidentally, not surprisingly, because the franchise industry is filled with entrepreneurs. Every franchisee is an entrepreneur. They own his or her business. The industry itself is built on the idea that you can provide a working model for someone, that entrepreneurs will gravitate toward that as a turnkey solution. I landed in there sort of unintentionally, if you will, about 20 years ago or so. And franchising has changed a lot in that period. But a decade later, I was fortunate enough to be involved in some multi-portfolio conglomerates in Atlanta, Georgia, and sat at the helm of a couple of those brands with hundreds of locations across the United States and in other countries. And it really is where the impetus for the book began, because I was able to see firsthand what was going on in the minds of those aspiring entrepreneurs when they were making decisions about whether to take this opportunity and go down this path, or stay within their world of predictable adequacy.
Okay, and then how do you transition to now being on this mission to help us become entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so I managed to quantify what I was seeing. I've helped hundreds, if not thousands, of entrepreneurs navigate this franchise world, and I was very curious about this sort of duality, this conflict that was going on in their heads. Of on 1 minute, they would all be very optimistic and could not wait to seize opportunity and go, build their empire. And when you start talking about the inherent risks associated with entrepreneurship, they would speak like an entirely different person. It was as if there were two different people in their heads. And I looked for the science to quantify this, and I found it pretty easily. So there's 65 different studies quoted in Boss Brain or referenced in Boss Brain. And what they did was they really validated these instincts that we all have and that were important for the rise of humanity, where some of us embrace our instinctive optimism, and others of us and sort of embrace the predictable world of adequacy. But our rise required both, Elaine. This is very important. There's nothing wrong with being an employee. In fact, great employees are hard to come by, and I wish we had more of them. So I'm not trying to vilify employment in any way. What I'm saying is, 2,000 years ago, someone stood on a beach somewhere in some faraway land and looked at the horizon and said, I'm going to build a raft and I'm going to sail across that horizon because I think something wonderful is out there. And that person had an entrepreneurial spirit. Simultaneously, someone was standing on the beach beside that guy and said, what are you doing? This is insane, right? Why would you do this? Why don't you stay here where it's safe and predictable and you know what tomorrow is going to be like? And our rise required both. But in today's world, there's so much predictability, particularly in the Western world, that it's tipped the scales. And that predictability, the base of Maslow's hierarchy, has really smothered our entrepreneurial instincts to the point where the United States now has, as a percentage, the lowest self-employment in history and the lowest self-employment among major industrialized nations. Canada has a much higher level of entrepreneurship than the United States right now. I know
Wow.
you live in Canada, so I bring that up.
Yes. Okay. So could it be, let's say I start a business in the United States and I fail. And fair enough, most business fail, at least on the first try. Now I'm not going to go hungry. There are all kind of ways in which I'll be able to sleep somewhere, eat or whatever. But it's, I think the biggest fear is the shame and losing face, and having to go back to my community and say, yes, I tried this idea and it didn't work out for me. And I think that's one of it's mostly the psychological barrier than
Sure.
the whatever physical of barrier of not being able to live, I guess.
I agree completely. That's why the subtitle to the book is Unlocking Your Entrepreneurial Instincts. It's really a psychological barrier. So let me be more specific. Failure within some context of entrepreneurship is inevitable. It doesn't mean your endeavor fails, but you may try something small within that endeavor. That didn't work out, and you adjust and you try something else, and you adjust and you try something else. Embrace that failure on some level is inevitable. Embrace it, get better, learn from it, and move on. And here's the thing to remember when you're trying to overcome that psychological barrier. We live in a world that is hiring. Every company is hiring right now. There are more jobs available in America right now than there have been in 10 years. So if you try something and it doesn't work out, it's not that hard to go back and get a job and retool and figure out how to do this again. And this is a common misperception is people think once I become an entrepreneur and I'm an entrepreneur and I can never have a job again, or vice versa. And that's not true. That's not true for me. I've moved in and out of entrepreneurship. I had a W-2 job as recently as gosh 2017. So when I need to take work, when I find an opportunity I want to take advantage of, I do. But that doesn't limit me from still pursuing those entrepreneurial endeavors that I'm driven to pursue.
I guess that's the question. I think one of the biggest losses that we have is that loss of imagination as well, and creativity, and seeing an opportunity and saying, oh, maybe I could take advantage of this opportunity. If we don't have, when I speak about entrepreneurship with friends, our conversation goes right away. What are the permits that I need to get? Who are the permission givers that have to give me this piece of paper allowing me to do this? So it's almost like, give me a plan and I will follow the plan, as opposed to the curiosity of trying to figure out how, I don't know, how to make a widget, how to create a new service.
Yeah, I agree with you. It is it is unfortunate that there's so many bureaucratic hurdles to pursuing your entrepreneurial dream. And sadly, I think that's just the case that we're going to have to face right now, which is really why the franchise industry rose so quickly, is it really gave you a roadmap to follow. Here's what permits you need. Here's what steps you need. Here's how to set up your entity, et cetera. But what's important, though, is to remember that all of those steps, those things are just paperwork. That isn't actually producing a result. That is processing information. And you only get paid when you produce, not when you process. So yes, those things are loathsome and no one wants to deal with all of the bureaucracy. But once those things are in place, you really can, you do have the infrastructure to unleash your creativity and your innovation. And coincidentally, you mentioned creativity, and creativity is one of the 4 entrepreneurial instincts that we talk about in Boss Brain.
I have a friend. I live in Canada, as I mentioned, and my friend wanted to be a Spanish teacher. And she's from South America, and she has taught before in South America. And she had this dream, and she asked me for some tips. And I said, well, start teaching. And she said, well, don't I need a certificate from someone? Don't I need permission, someone to give me permission that certifies that I am able to teach? And I said, well, if you go to a teaching school, you are probably a better Spanish speaker than the teacher himself or herself that will be giving you that certificate. All you need is just say, I am open for business. And Sadly enough, she never started that business because she
Yeah.
wanted to have a piece of paper that says that she was qualified to teach her own language. But let me ask you, in your book, you say that the trend of entrepreneurship is declining in the United States. Looking in the future, I mean, is it going to, how low is it going to go?
I know the answer to this question, and it makes me sad every time I answer it, Elaine. As 25 years ago, 13% of the United States was self-employed. Today, that number is less than 7. So it has been cut in half in the past 25 years. On that trajectory, that means that sometime in the mid 2040s, 99% of Americans are going to work for the other 1%. And people don't believe me when I say this, but you can go look at these statistics at the National Bureau of Labor and Statistics. Their government website outlines these very clearly, and you can see these for yourself. It's really a sad statistic for what is supposed to be the most entrepreneurial country in the world, which really is kind of still true. America ranks 3rd in the world for entrepreneurial spirit, meaning the percentage of the population that wants to be self-employed. So about 70% of the United States workforce wants to be self-employed. That's 100 million people who wish they were their own boss, but they aren't. The number 1 and number 2 spots are occupied by Portugal and Poland, coincidentally, but we're 3rd at 70%. So yes, America is still very entrepreneurial from a spirit, but we're not converting that spirit into action. And every year for the past 40 to 50 years, entrepreneurship has declined in America.
That's very sad. In your book, you speak about 4 primary instincts of the boss brain. Can you briefly tell us what are those instincts?
Yeah, so we talked about one of them already, being creativity, but that's really not the first. We outline the importance of the instincts themselves, and then their subcomponents. So not to overwhelm your listeners, let's just talk about the first one and the most important one. The first one is the instinct is belief. And that belief is made up of 3 subcomponents. The first subcomponent is optimism. And we talked about this earlier. The guy standing on the beach, looking beyond the horizon, imagining that things were better out there. I believe my future can be better than my past or my present. I think that Tali Sharot's book, Optimism Bias, really proved that we are instinctively hardwired to be optimistic. So the second component then has to be translated into action. So you have to take optimism into action. But how do you do that? Well, you do that through self-efficacy. You have to believe in your own ability to manufacture the future that you can envision yourself. I know lots of people who are optimistic, but they don't think they can do it. They don't have the self-efficacy, the confidence in themselves to make that a reality. And then if they do have that confidence, it's usually easily converted into action. So belief is made up of optimism, self-efficacy, and action. And what we do is we outline the remainder of the instincts. You end up with 12 different subcomponents within 4 different instincts. So I don't want to overwhelm everybody now, but if you buy the book, you'll be able to see these very clearly. We have charts and graphs that show how these flow together. And of course, it ends with creativity that we talked about earlier.
Well, okay. And then is there a kind of framework that could, let's say I have been an employee all my life, but I have a dream to start, I don't know, a service, let's say a photography service, that's what I do. So is there a framework to help people get from this is my reality and this is where I would like to be, how do I get there?
Yeah, so the pandemic really revealed a great opportunity that has been overlooked. The whole world is connected now. You can easily look on your phone and see what's going on the other side of the world, what other people are doing, what billions of people have succeeded or failed at. And that made us forget that the best way to begin is in your own backyard. And the pandemic really revealed the importance of what I call hyper localization. So look in your own neighborhood. If you can offer a product or service within your own neighborhood, then you can expand it to your own community. If you can expand it into your community, then you can take it throughout the town, throughout the county, throughout the state, throughout the country. One of the problems and the reason why people feel so overwhelmed is they look at multinational global online businesses and think they have to go from here to there
Mm.
immediately. And that's simply not the case. Hyper localize your business. And in today's world, which is challenged logistically, you actually have a competitive advantage over major brands because you are there in that community. And right now, with everything that's going on with the pandemic, major brands are having trouble bringing their products and services to the community, to that local level. So you really have a competitive advantage right now if you take that action.
Wow. Maybe one of the ways to take uh, uh, leverage that competitive advantage is also to get out there and communicate your dreams and ideas to people, as opposed to, I don't know, spending more time in front of your computer or TV. I mean,
I'm happy to hear you say that. Yeah. So the average American spends 3.5 hours a day watching television. So the average American also spends about 3.5 hours a day staring at their telephone. So if you combine those, you've got almost a full work day's worth of time that you're wasting that you could be putting towards your dreams and efforts. So the third instinct within Boss Brain is focus. And we talk a lot about focus and the importance of automating and eliminating, right? Simplifying your life and your environment and distilling it down to only that which has a purpose and helps you get one step closer to your goals. That's not what's happening in the world right now. There's a lot of white noise. There's a lot of distraction, and we're so succumbed to that right now that we feel incredibly busy, but we're no longer productive. So we're not actually making gains toward our dreams.
right. In your day-to-day life, encouraging people or showing people the path towards entrepreneurship, what are some of the most common excuses that you hear?
so usually they say I don't have the time, and I think we just dispelled that myth, right? You probably have about 7 hours a day that you're wasting doing other things. You feel busy and you think those hours are filled, but there are things that could be eliminated or automated in your life and then diverted, because you can't save time, you can only redirect it. The other excuse we get is that they don't have the funds or the money. I think this is solved by the hyper localization and starting small and growing contiguously, along with the fact that the Small Business Administration in the United States is larger than every entrepreneurship program in the world combined. They turn out hundreds of millions of dollars for new development and entrepreneurship every year. And are there bureaucratic hurdles to getting those dollars? Of course there are. But if you're not willing to go through a few pieces of paperwork to get someone to fund your dream, do you really want that dream? Or which one of those two is more important to you? I myself have funded businesses recently through the Small Business Administration, and it was a pain, and the paperwork was not fun. But once it was done and in place, I was able to pick up a business recently that I'm now expanding throughout the southeastern United States.
Well, I think your book, well, it's a reflection of our reality. We are losing this dream of entrepreneurship and being self-reliant. That's the word I was looking for. Because when you are an entrepreneur, you don't rely on whether your boss is in a good mood or a bad mood. You are your own boss. And I think that's one of the things that bothers a lot of people about regular employment, that their future depends on somebody else. And only you can take control of your own life.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the pandemic really revealed that 26 paychecks a year is a house of cards. And we thought that was the height of predictability and stability, but millions of people found out very quickly that they had no control over their own futures. And coincidentally, in 2020, more businesses were started in the United States that have been started in many, many years. So hopefully the pandemic, one good upside of the pandemic is that it really unlocked these people's entrepreneurial instincts and sort of pushed them, give them a spark toward pursuing those dreams. And I'm hoping we can maintain it. And that's certainly the mission that I'm on. And I'm going to do everything I can to make that happen.
And so your mission is to have how many new entrepreneurs in the globe getting their business started?
Yeah, so we said earlier that there are 100 million Americans who wish they were on their own boss. That's a lot of people. So I'm trying to just get a million of them, 1 in 100 of those aspiring entrepreneurs to be able to navigate from or from traditional employment to self-employment. And that's the mission that I'm on, is to rescue them from traditional employment.
Well, and I'm sure your book will help those people who are searching this guidance find their way to entrepreneurship. Can you tell us one more time the title of the book and where can the listeners follow you?
So the book is called Boss Brain: Unlock Your Entrepreneurial Instincts. You can find it on Amazon or Barnes and Noble, or you can go to my website, TreyWilliams.com, TRAWilliams.com. And while you're there, you can follow me on Facebook or Twitter, and we can connect. And I would encourage anybody who goes to the website to reach out to me. I love engaging with individuals. I love having these conversations and helping people along the way. So I'd love to have a conversation with your listeners.
I also would like to mention that there is a free few sample chapters of your book there. So if
Yes,
they are thinking whether, oh, should I get this book or not? Well, get a free sample. Is there. All you have to do is just, I don't know, just put your name and email address and you will send that to them. And I
that's right.
found that very helpful myself. Okay, well, I love this conversation. Thank you so much for your time.
It's been a pleasure to be here, Lane. Thank you for having me. I look forward to coming back one day in the future.